This is Ben here with the Point Five Patrol, and I'm here with Jose, and he might also be known by his YouTube handle, Club Version. He has been an instructor for 11 years. He has 18 total years of track experience, and he also holds an MSF Level 1 and Level 2 certification. And he is often found out at Sebring teaching new students the ropes. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
How you doing, Ben? Yeah, been driving for 18 years. I started off actually drifting. I was a little drift kid. I had a welded diff S14, SR20, and that was that was a pretty wide eye-opening experience, and that really got me hooked into driving on track and doing skid pad events. And then eventually, I just couldn't do the drifting anymore. They closed County Line Raceway. It was an old school 8th mile track that had a drift skid pad. And from there on, then I had to go over to Homestead Speedway and do track days there. So that's typically my home track. Sebring's my secondary home track. I'm still learning it.
Okay.
I've been going it forever, but every time I go, I learn something new. And that's basically how I've gone to the track. I'm always learning something new every time I go. Even though it's been 18 years, you still learn something new.
Yep. Sometimes they're good lessons, sometimes they're not so great.
Yeah.
And so today, the topic of discussion is driver development. And you being as experienced as you are, pretty excited to have you kind of go through what you're looking for in in the different levels of students. So obviously, you're coaching novice, intermediate, and advanced students. What are you looking for out of a novice on their first HPDE event?
Pretty much it's all about safety. Like I want this person to feel as safe as possible on track and have fun. That's the whole point of it. It's to have fun, be safe, and get home with the car, the way you got there,
Yeah.
with no issues. Typically, when I start off a brand new green student on the first 3 laps, we usually tell them it's a yellow, full course yellow, no passing, and we teach them the line very slowly. And I always tell them stay on the line even if the track is yellow, even if you're gonna go into the pit, stay on the racing line. And I always want to teach them the safest line and the most predictable line, because someone coming from behind you, if they know that you're on the racing line, they know where to pass you and what to do if there's an emergency. So
And
that's typically what I teach them.
well, that's the safest thing.
Yeah.
So let's move to intermediate. What's the difference there then from what you've been showing a novice to what you're going to show an intermediate student?
That's when it gets a little bit tricky. The intermediate students are actually the hardest ones. They have the highest confidence level, but their skill level's down here.
Right.
And it's hard to bring them to match even. And typically what I do is I get in the car with them and I feel out what they do. Most of the time it's their inputs are too aggressive because they feel like they have the confidence because they've already been to like 5, 6 track days. They know the layout. They just want to get faster. But they don't understand like to get faster is actually to slow down your inputs and be smoother. And that connect is very hard to teach them. So an alternative is I'll put them in my car and I'll tell them, I'm going to drive you around the track and show you what I do. Just pay very close attention to my inputs. And sometimes it clicks for them. Other times it like blows their mind and they're like, oh my God, what do I do now? And then they go out on track again and then they're actually slower, but then I can see that they're working on each of the things that I was teaching them. And then it takes them a long time to get back up to the same speed they were at, but they're a much smoother driver, a much safer driver, and more predictable as well.
For me, I think smoothness was a more recent lesson that I learned, or the most recent. You had mentioned that every time you go out the track, you're learning something new. And that's actually something that I've been working on, specifically vision and smoothness over probably the last 4 or 5 track sessions while I've been out there. And it's funny that you should bring that up with the intermediate student about smooth input. I remember when I had my FK8 and I was an intermediate, I was stabby on the brakes because I thought that that's what you were supposed to do. You know, that's threshold braking. You're supposed to wait till the very, very, very last second and just mash them. And it actually unbalanced the car on a regular basis to the point where, you know, you hear the tires squeal and the car in general, like you're slinging the weight around too fast that it's just not ready for that input.
Yeah.
And I wasn't running the best lap times either. I thought I was doing a good job. I really wasn't. And when I really started to work on smoothness, you're right, it does slow you down at first, but after you adapt it and you figure out how that actually works, my lap time significantly improved, and the overall feel of the car when I'm driving in it is more comfortable than it was before. And it's weird because I'm the one driving it, right? So
Uh,
you would think that I would expect to be comfortable no matter what I was doing, but stabbing the brakes and forcing yourself into a seat belt is not very comfortable.
no.
And now I'm running much better lap times. I feel like I'm very predictable on track, and I'm pretty quick to get point buys. And it's become less competition. It's turned the competition into fun. And now I just go out there and have fun.
Yeah, same with me. I've never done like the time attack stuff, but I'm in a group chat down here in South Florida, and we compare lap times, but that's just more like, man, I got it in this car, I got it in that car. For me, it's I just want to have a reliable car that I can have fun with every weekend and develop better as a driver.
Yep.
And if my lap times keep getting better, that means I know that it's me, it's not the car. I'm not putting a bunch of crazy bolt-on parts to try to improve the time. It's myself.
Yep.
And another great tip that I teach a lot of the students is you kind of want to hint at the car what's going to happen next. You got to tell the car what you're going to do before you do it. So for example, I actually get in the braking zone much earlier than other people do. But what I'm doing is I'm doing a light brush of the brakes because I'm going to let the car know, hey, we're going to go on a hard braking zone here. So I kind of settle the car into the braking zone before I get on the brakes hard. Same
Yep.
thing with turning. I kind of like tip, if you watch my videos, I tip the wheel a little bit, and then the car settles into that groove, and then I do the turning. You
Yep.
have to let the car know what's going to happen before it happens. And that actually helps the weight transfer much more. And
Yep.
it's hard to teach that to people. Once they feel it, it clicks in their
Yep.
head. But telling it to someone, it's very difficult. Everything is about feel.
I've had I've had a few different students, and I know that I'm a front wheel drive driver, and I've had students that are all wheel drive, rear wheel drive, and front wheel drive. And I try to teach them front wheel drive braking techniques no matter what the format I'm in.
Oh, no.
Well, and the biggest thing about that is smoothness. I'm trying to teach them how to be smooth with their brake application because I feel like it transcends front wheel drive and can easily translate over to the other formats as well. The smoother you are on the brakes, regardless of the drive style,
Yeah, it's
is
going to help you.
it's going to help you. And that comes with trail braking, that comes with threshold braking, and I call it the reverse trail, which is more like chauffeur braking,
Hmm.
but it helps the car feel settled. It helps the car feel safe. And, one of the biggest things that you'd mentioned was safety there. So I know that my braking style is probably a bit weird for some folks. And I've gotten into the car in the passenger seat. I'm like, what is this person doing? Like they're throwing me all over the place, and the car just doesn't. They're using curbs they don't need to use. They're punchy on the brakes, and it's like, man, we're asking for it here. I need to stop this behavior before it gets out of control.
Yeah, you
So,
got to reel them in for sure.
yeah, let's talk about advanced drivers. And I have not yet had a chance to coach an advanced driver. I've gotten to ride with one, but I wasn't necessarily coaching. And that was actually the curb conversation that I had. They were using curbs that really unsettled the car that had no bearing on a good lap time. It was like, what? Hit those. We don't need to hit those. All you're doing is like the car's doing this and slamming back down on the ground. And,
Yeah.
you could be a foot further to the left on the entrance and exit of this corner without hitting those curbs and probably pick up a tenth or two. So advanced drivers, what you got?
All right, advanced, those are not as tricky as the intermediates. The advanced drivers, they have a lot of seat time. They know their car very well. They know the line very well. A lot of times their skill levels up here, it's the opposite, but their confidence is down here. And a lot of times I notice they don't really look ahead because they've memorized the track at this point. So everything is instinct and everything is coming at them at a much faster pace. I just have to keep reminding them, look ahead, look ahead, look ahead, look ahead. And that's one of the biggest things I've noticed with them. They're not pro. I've never been in with a pro driver, so I won't be able to tell you. But I can tell you people that are very advanced that hey, I need some help on this. it's like techniques, like looking ahead is one of them, and also the trail braking, and also just trying to get the car balanced into the turn before they go into it.
Yep.
It's those same techniques, it's just more refined. You feel the difference.
Yep. Well, you only have 100% of grip. So if you don't have 101, second you hit
Yeah, yeah,
101, you're driving at 11. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, 11 tenths, and that can, that can get hairy. It got hairy for me, especially, greasy tires are dangerous. And a lot of folks will keep going even though the tires are greasy, and then they come off the track to, "Oh, the tires were greasy, but I was still hammering on it." And it's like, you just got lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing between the intermediate and advanced. An intermediate driver doesn't have the experience to feel the car and counter steer at the right time. An advanced driver would, but not an intermediate driver, and that's that confidence level is where the difference is.
Yep.
And for me, I mean, it didn't take me, even though I started in drifting and I knew how to counter steer, how to get the car sideways, and I felt comfortable out of control with the car. Maybe not until like the eighth or going to the ninth year of driving on track, it kind of clicked for me, like, okay, I need to really catch the turn here. And I felt comfortable having the car loose. Now my car is set up extremely loose. If anyone gets in my car, they're going to spin for sure on the first lap out, because I have it super loose now, but that's the way I like it. And I feel comfortable, but it took me up until like 9, 10 years to get to that point.
Right.
And advanced drivers are the same way. They're already comfortable with the car going sideways, so they're pushing it. Just like you said, the 101, that extra 1% is the percent where the car gets loose. But
Yep.
they're comfortable doing it. Intermediate drivers are not, and that's the dangerous part. That's the
Yep.
part where you gotta reel them in. You're like, hey, calm down. We're gonna take it back in. Did you feel what you did wrong? What was it? Was this? Was that? So that's the tough part.
I find that target focusing is pretty predominant in intermediate as well.
Yeah,
And I've seen it in advance too, because I was guilty of it. I don't do it
yeah.
anymore. I just give people their space. But that was a hard lesson learned that I wish didn't have to be learned as hard as it was. But unfortunately, I'm pretty hard headed, and sometimes I just got to get the crap knocked out of me to figure it out.
I mean, it's your adrenaline, man. That's another thing. You still get nervous as soon as you get out on track. The first session, first lap, you're still kind of shaky. It's normal. Everyone has the same experience. You're not the only one.
Yeah.
And that adrenaline kicks in, and then someone where you're like, oh man, this guy's like on me, or this guy in front of me is like way too slow. Like I gotta get him out of the way. But then they fall on the straights, so they have more power than us. Like that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
Just go and just do just go through the pits, do a drive by, and let the traffic clear and go out again. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
We're not trying to win trophies.
Well, I think the timing equipment is typically something that you're going to see in like advanced intermediate to advanced, whereas like lower intermediate and novice, it's typically not permitted in the car and the clubs that I run with. And I think that that's a good thing. At the same time, how do you know you're doing a good lap? And so I see where the want to have timing equipment comes into play. I know some instructors have, they'll have an app on their phone, one of the track apps, and they'll hide it in their pocket while they're going around the track with their student, because they're using that as a measurement tool to see how their student's actually doing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the best way to go about it, but at the same time, everybody's curious about what kind of lap time is happening. And in some cases, they're curious about it regardless of how that lap is driven. Like I've seen some YouTube videos, and VIR being my home track, I've gotten pretty comfortable with it. And I've seen some YouTube videos where I'm like,
You're scared.
yeah, scared for them. I'm sitting there cringing, just watching what's going on. It's like, man, they haven't learned that yet. They haven't figured that one out. Their hands are all over the steering wheel. I was the same. Like when you're doing this and not not keeping it at 9, like this is smooth. It's easy to be smooth this way, even if you've got to move it just slightly if it's a really tight turn. But
Yeah,
if you're doing this and then grabbing it here, spinning it back and doing that, man, you're asking for it.
The timing thing, I don't really pay attention to that, especially when they're super green. Like a lot of times they have like a Garmin and everything. They don't even know how to set it up. And I'm like, oh, let's go out the session. I tell them to forget about it most of the time. They get it later on and they set it up, but I can already tell just by feel and the entry corner speed. I know that they're getting faster. I don't need the timer to let me know. But they don't know that. but I can tell, I can feel it already. And then once your neck starts cranking and it starts to get sore, you're like, oh yeah, they're getting faster.
Yep, they're getting the
And
hang
then
of it now.
yeah, they're getting the hang of it now. And then I hype them up because it's fun. You're like, yeah, you got it, let's go. And you push them a little bit, and it's fun. But yeah, you always have to keep that safety margin. You
Yep.
can't overdo it. But yeah, it's just it's a fine line, but it's fun doing it. I enjoy it a lot.
Oh yeah,
I love feeling the progression and everything, and when you both in the car and they get the turn just right, and you feel the car do that slip angle mid corner, and you both look at each other and you're like, you felt that, and they're like, yeah, and they're like, let's go. It's a great moment. It's very humbling too. I
yep.
like it.
I think instructing is incredibly rewarding, and it actually wasn't something that I was. It's something that I wanted to do, but I didn't think I was ready for it. And a good friend of mine, Chris, he's also the only one that was willing to get into the passenger seat with me after my crash on my very first session back out
Yeah.
at the track. And everybody else was like, "You're crazy to go riding with that guy. Why would you get in the car with that guy? You're going to get hurt. You know, that kind of thing."
I mean that's totally the wrong approach. You
Well,
definitely you need the help. If anyone can give you the help, you need it. I mean, that's what we're all there to help each other.
exactly. Well, there's different types of instructors too. So he's ultimately the one that talked me into going to the instructor clinic and all of that. And I didn't realize, yeah, I was very nervous and apprehensive at first, especially when I had my first student, and it ended up being really rewarding. And
Yeah,
I want to keep feeling that reward. And that's
yeah,
kind of what drives me to get back in the car with somebody. Once it clicks for them, it's rewarding for me saying I might have just had something to do with that.
yeah. It's a great time, and you learn your track much better too,
Mhm.
because it's just more time. The more seat time you get, even if you're just a passenger, it's just more seat time.
Mhm.
And you get to feel the turns more, everything compounds and it keeps building and building and building. So
Yeah.
that that's why I do it because I enjoy it, and you get free track time.
Yeah.
It's so
I
it's a
get
big
a
plus.
I get to go out next weekend. I've got a track event coming up, and I have a green student. They've been to the track once before, so this is their second time out, and it's in a white Civic Type R. A little bit nervous, of course, getting into a white car again after I got out of one that I had rolled, but I think we're going to be just
Oh man,
fine. Yeah,
don't worry about it. Don't worry
yeah,
about it. I mean,
yeah.
if anything, if you want to get out of the car, if you see a flag worker, put your arm out, and they'll black flag you, and you'll go straight in the pits. Don't even worry about it.
No, I think we'll be all right. I'm excited for it, and I hope my students are ready to learn.
The one thing, if they've already been on track, you gotta be mindful that they've already been taught a couple things, and even if it's a bad habit, but it's not something that's destructive, just let it ride. Don't be too picky because they're gonna want to absorb a lot, but you don't want to bring them down either too.
Yeah,
Because I've had that happen. If you point out every little detail, you start to notice they could stop listening to you because it's a lot of information. You just remember the first time you're on track, you don't even know where to look, like what's happening, like, oh my God, I'm on track. And it's just, there's just a lot of things happening. So
yeah,
clear, concise instructions and not too much information is the best.
right. No, I agree. I definitely agree. Um, have you had any horror stories as an instructor, a student that you just couldn't get through to, or have you been one of the lucky ones that?
I've been pretty lucky. The only one I can remember maybe was there was a guy who had like a Viper, and it was one of the newer gen Vipers, and he was so twitchy. And I was like, oh my God, this car is gonna spin on me on turn one at Homestead. Homestead is like 100 once to turn in there at the apex. And that car could have easily done 130 there for sure, or 40. But it was so twitchy and he kept misshifting, and I kind of felt it was his nerves. Like the car's too much for him for the first time ever on track. So I had to be very patient with him. I've had to pull him in a couple times early and calm him down. And then eventually he let me drive the car. And when I drove that car, I understood why he was so twitchy. That car is very sensitive to steering input. So you have to be so smooth. Like that's an advanced driver car, 100%. There's no way a beginner driver is going to be able to build on that car. They're going to just depend on the power and never really push the car in the limits on the turn.
Yep.
That was the only worst case scenario I had because I felt like this car is going to spin on me and we're going to hit the wall.
Yep.
But I calmed them down. I brought them in a couple times, and that's how it went that day. But I haven't had any other crazier stories.
Well, you mentioned before we started the show with MSF Level 2 that if an incident does happen, it's not the student's fault. It's the
Yeah,
instructor's fault 100%
you
of the
got to
time.
pull it in. You're gonna feel it. You feel it coming, and the misshifts. They're missing the apexes already. They're doing sharper inputs because they're getting more scared as the turn keeps coming back in front of them over and over. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna be like, you gotta calm them down or bring them in. Like that's the only way.
Yeah.
And you have to reassess. Like, ask them, what did you feel? Why did that happen? Like, you ask them the hard questions, and they're gonna give you the answers because they're gonna think about it. They're gonna stop and think what they were doing.
I've had my very first weekend out instructing, I think I ended up in 6 different cars.
Oh man, that's
It was ridiculous. So I had a student that was assigned to me, but then their car broke down. And so I would go up to the grid to see if I was needed. And so you basically just stand there. Hey, do you need me? Anybody missing an instructor? And I ended up in a BRZ. I ended up in an M3. I ended up in a Porsche Boxster convertible.
my God.
Uh, I don't remember the other cars, but I remember the Porsche Boxster because I'd never been around the track in a convertible except for on parade laps in my dad's S2000. Convertibles make me extremely nervous, even if they have a roll bar. You're just asking for death. But this guy was actually a smooth driver. He wasn't out there to set crazy lap times. He was just out there to have fun. And we ended up, I mean, it was like a pleasure cruise. It was amazing.
Yeah.
The M3, on the other hand, was caged. And instead of, a normal standard shifter, they had like this broom handle shifter. And the guy was missing shifts because the throws were so long. It's like third, fourth, fifth, over
Oh
here.
my God.
And we ended up spinning in turn 1 all because of, it was just poor clutch work.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, ergonomics too is a big thing.
Yeah.
That's one thing. As soon as I sit in a student's car, I tell them to move the seat and everything. Because a lot of times people just sit in the way they drive their seat on the street. I
Yep.
tell them, hey, look, here we have to be like your wrists have to be over the edge of the wheel. You have to be comfortable. You have to be able to move fully lock to lock without any issues. When you
Yep.
reach the shifter, you have to have full clutch engagement, and that's a thing that a lot of them don't even like. They don't even expect that to happen as soon as they get in the car. They just want to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, ergonomics is a big thing too.
I think that's a good call out. So the very first thing that a student should expect from their instructor before the first session is that instructor helping them get their seat set up correctly. And being close enough doesn't mean that you need to slide the seat forward, because then you're messing up how you clutch, how you brake, how you hit the accelerator. Move the seat back forward so that it brings you closer to the steering wheel that way. And the length for your legs to get to the pedals remains the same.
Yeah,
So,
everyone's different, but for sure, yeah, you have to get all those inputs have to be comfortable because you're in a high stress moment, and a lot of times everything is working by instinct. So if everything is in reach of your hands, it's just much easier.
yep. And you have to make sure that you adjust your mirrors accordingly too, because once you move your seat position,
Yeah, your mirrors are off.
yep, your mirrors are off. Your rear view mirror will be off as well. And typically with green students, I find that I am managing traffic a lot for them
Yeah.
until they start getting used to it. And traffic is definitely a more advanced concept that you figure out in intermediate before you are promoted to advanced. But, it's one of those things.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy the traffic. Sometimes if it's fast, like in the advanced groups, when there's no point buys and you can apex someone, you can get them right on the braking zone, you can get them anywhere. That's fun.
Yeah.
But these people, like a lot of the groups that I run with, they've been the same guys that have been running for like the past 8 to 10 years or even more. So I have a lot of trust in them. Like we go deep in the brake zones, like almost bumper to bumper or door to door, and that's the funnest part for me. because it's not we're wheel to wheel racing, but I'm doing a pass, or I'm giving him the pass in our own safety comfort zone, because we trust each other. How many years we've been doing it together,
Right.
and
Yep.
that's just something that's priceless to me. That's one of the other enjoyments I get.
So let's talk about your expectations. Say you have a green student and you're going to promote them to intermediate. What did they do? What did they show you in order to deserve that promotion?
Well, I asked them this easy question: would I be happy having them driving next to me in the same group as me, in the intermediate group? And that's that they have good track knowledge. They stay on the racing line at all times. They understand and they give the point by at the right times on the straightaways, because the intermediate groups usually you can only pass in the straight, and that they're very consistent. I don't see them missing an apex or anything like that. And then as far as the advanced drivers are, they have to have that confidence, and they have to hit the apex every single time. The only time they miss is because there was a malfunction either, or the track was greasy, and you felt that when you're in the car with them. And that's the difference, really.
Okay.
And they have to have the momentum too, because someone can be smooth, consistent, and everything, but if they don't have the momentum, why would you put them in a higher run group? They're just gonna be swamped. They're gonna get nervous, and I wouldn't want someone to be that slow. If I'm coming in out of my way more momentum, that can be an accident happening.
Yeah.
So
I have seen one situation where somebody was advanced too soon, and this is where the instructor has failed you. They bumped them out of green just because of the number of times that they had been to the track. But the fundamentals weren't there. The heel toe shifting in this specific case almost caused 3 cars, myself included, to all rear end one another.
oh my God.
Because right at the apex of turn 1, they decided to ruin a downshift, like ruin it, to the point where you could see their car jerk forward and slow down. And the car behind them had to slam on brakes. The car behind that car had to slam on brakes. And then I was the car behind that car. And I had Chris in the car with me. And I was this close to the back bumper of a Porsche.
That's crazy.
And so we avoided this person like the plague every time that we went out. Stay away from them, but let them know that you want to point by at the same time. So we'd like creep in and then kind of back off, sort of thing, until and they weren't comfortable giving point bys yet. And so it was causing traffic, but it was like playing yo-yo with this driver just so that you could get the point and get the heck away from them. But the trouble was we were lapping them, and we should have been lapping them, but they shouldn't have been in the intermediate group yet. So that instructor was probably just out there for the free track time. And they weren't actually out there to develop a student that was going to be a reliable asset to have on track in the intermediate group.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I like about Chin track days. They make you do a check ride with one of their most advanced instructors, or the head instructor, and that'll be the final judgment. Because I can promote someone, but if they don't pass the check ride, they won't be able to move up.
Yep.
So I like that a lot about that organization.
Some organizations have really good stops like that in place, whereas others, it's a little more just, oh, he said it was good, so I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah,
they will have
those are dangerous.
Yeah, they will have advanced student check rides, but the green to yellow, there wasn't one. But the yellow to, say, blue, there was one. And, I feel like a lot of these folks, they needed more seat time, and they needed more seat time with an instructor in the car. One that actually cared and knew the format. Oftentimes, certain clubs will just throw you in any vehicle, regardless of if you may or may not be comfortable in it, because they're simply not asking. For example, I'm going out with Tidewater Sports Car Club next weekend. Not only do they send me a questionnaire, they send the student a questionnaire, and they want to know from me what I'm most comfortable coaching. And then they'll make a student decision pairing based on that information. And they also give you the student's contact information a week prior to the event start, so that it's not just oh, hey, meet me on grid. We have 15 minutes to check out your car and make sure that it's teched and safe to go out on track. Oh, hey, by the way, my name's Ben. I guess I'm going to get in now because the 15 minutes is up, or even the 5 because people were late and people are starting to grid up and get on track. And
Yeah,
that's a really good way to end up in a car that's
not
not
ready.
safe, not ready, not safe, but you didn't have enough time to check it out. And they didn't tech it at the tech shed, so they're leaving it on the instructor in some cases to do this sort of thing, which to me is madness. And to meet somebody right then. I want my student to pit near me. I want them to pit next to me, not just near me, next to me. That way, if they have questions in the pit, hey, what should my tire pressure be? Hey, why don't we take a look at that? Or, hey, does this sound funny to you? Or, hey, take a look at this. Or, is that an oil leak? Is that a coolant leak? I want to be able to be next to that person for the duration of the weekend so that I can really keep tabs on everything they're doing, both in the paddock and on the track.
Yeah. Fortunately, I mean, what Chin does the same thing. They give you the contact info a week earlier, and
They
and
do.
they let you
Yeah,
know.
they do.
Yeah. But as far as having the car set up, a lot of times I take my tire pressure gauge with me when I go to their car, and I check their tires for them.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, what did you put them at? Did you know that you want to check when they're hot, but we gotta lower them now before we go out? And they're like, oh, for real, this and that. So they learn a lot with me too about all those things and the brake fluid. I gotta make sure.
Yep. There are
A
some
lot
that,
of, a lot of times they go with the OEM fluid, but they're so green they don't even push the car close enough to be able to blow the fluid. So,
yeah.
but I am conscientious about it when I'm in the car with them. Like, hey, how do the brakes feel? How do the brakes feel? Hey, it's the fifth lap. How do the brakes feel? So I kind of like check up on them a lot.
Those are all things that I wish I had known for my very first HPDE. And luckily, I had a friend of mine who was an instructor that was the one that talked me into going in the first place. And he gave me a recommendation for brake fluid and that kind of thing. But there are other things. I didn't have a tire pressure gauge, and now I would go to the track without one. I bring my Milwaukee compressor so I can air them up when I leave. But I bring, my tire chuck, small assortment of tools. I make sure that I've got track insurance. I make sure that my brake fluid is good to go. I make sure that my pads are good to go. And green students, I mean, they don't even know where the blend line is.
Yeah,
They were able to make it to the track using Google Maps.
yeah,
And so you kind of got to build on it from there in some cases.
yeah. I always bring my toolbox ready and able to do a brake job on track. Because that's the most common failure. Like cracked rotors happen to me a bunch of times. I've wasted pads to the metal. I've always brought extra pads with me. Like I have always a set of extra pads. I
Yeah.
buy one set, I use it a couple of track days, and then I buy the next one coming up already because I already know it's gonna happen already.
I just did the same thing yesterday. I probably
Yeah.
have 60, 70% remaining on my front pads. I went ahead and bought
Yeah.
another set.
Yeah, because you know you already like it too, the way it feels.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing about braking that people don't think about when you go to the advanced group is you're going to be braking offline. There's
Yes.
more rubber on that side of the track. It's more greasy. You have to be even more mindful of your inputs when you're offline. And a lot of people don't understand that. And a lot of them just run through the brake zone because they're like, oh my God, I can't brake at the same distance as I did when I was online. And then that's another problem.
And that's probably something that's really predominant down in Florida, just with the heat. I can't imagine how greasy things get and
Oh, yeah.
how fast they get greasy. You
Yeah,
know,
I only get my best lap time on the first and second session in the morning. Once it gets to like noon, the track is super greasy. But that's when I post up the videos when I'm going sideways, 'cause that's the only time I can go like that.
yep.
But yeah, it then it cools off again like after 3, 4, like that's when the track gets good again. But usually that lunchtime to like 2 or 3 p.m. is the worst time to be on track. But you learn a lot with the car loose like that.
So, what kind of advice would you give a new instructor? You've been instructing for a while, and say it's a new instructor's first time out and they're nervous about it. What kind of advice would you give them?
I'll remind them their student's gonna be nervous too. You're
Yeah.
not the only one nervous. And it's just put yourself in their shoes. As soon as you get in the car, think of how it was when you were first time being taught. And that's the best advice I can give you.
Yeah. It's
It's just you have to put that mindset. You can't just think, oh, I'm an instructor now, this and that. I'm gonna teach them this and this. It's like, no, no, no. Like calm down, be patient. They're just as nervous and more nervous than you are 100% of the time when they're green. When they've already been on track, that's the one where you got to fight that confidence level issue. But they're usually never going to do that to you. I mean, unless it's a crazy organization, they don't care. But I've never had that happen, to be honest.
I've heard horror stories about it from other track buddies. I guess I've gotten fairly lucky so far, and my students have been pretty good.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to having one make it all the way to the advanced group from green and kind of sticking with them the whole time, just so that I can see their journey, because it's exciting. And that's the
Yeah.
point. That's the point. It means that I've done my job, and I know that I still have things to work on as an instructor. Sometimes I over explain things, especially in the car. They're not listening to a full explanation of,
They're not gonna listen.
right.
Just I go in and I tell them these are my three commands. Brake, and the deeper I goes, the deeper I want you go in the braking go. Turn left, turn right. Those are the only commands you're gonna know. And then when we get in the pits, I'll tell you what you did, what did you feel, and also I tell them to open the wheel, because when they come out, they kind of like stick into the turn and they want to stay in the turn longer than what the turn actually is. It's like, no, you need to open up. Why open the track? Go to the left, or go to the right, So,
Yep, track in,
look,
track out, open the wheel,
yeah,
and these are all things that they've got to learn.
yeah,
I remember the first time my instructor told me to open the wheel, I was like, "What?
yeah,
What are you asking me?" Or track out? I didn't know what
yeah,
track out was when I was brand new. I was like,
yeah. Track like that. Track out and open the wheel are the same thing. It's just
yeah,
new terms you never heard of.
"Yep, track out. You need to go in the direction of the G-force. Track
Yeah,
in, go the other
but
way."
remember, you do all those things before you're in the pits when you tell them these things. You don't do this when you're out on track. It's already too late. They're already
Yep,
trying to look around to see what's going on.
yep, yep. I agree. Well, what else can you think of that might be of, a value to, say, a new instructor or a student that's kind of looking to get some information on what's going through our heads while while they're the ones driving?
Just be clear and concise. They're not gonna be able to absorb a lot anyways, and have fun. That's what you're there for.
Jose, also known as Club Version, for coming on the show and talking to us about driver development, and also about what instructors are looking for, what we're looking for to get you from green to yellow to blue, or whatever color your institution uses, and really giving us a clear understanding of what you might be taught and the mindset that's going on both sides of the car, both in the passenger seat and in the driver's seat. So this has been with the Point By Patrol signing off, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Ben. Take care.